Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we're going to talk a little bit about dark versus light versus wounded dark specifically. So if you've been following me for a while, you will have heard me talk a little bit about wounded light, wounded dark, divine light, all these different things. And of course, this is a dualistic way of looking at energy. And I understand that, and I want to make that clear. But I also think that we live in a world of contrast. And so the dark and light spectrum is one way for us to look at and categorize and kind of begin to understand in our human mind these various types of energies and these various types of wounding. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you'll also have heard me say very specifically that dark and light are not synonyms for good and bad. And when we leave it at that, not only are we playing into like an inherently racist concept, we are like, it's wildly incomplete, okay? Dark and light are not synonyms for bad and good or evil and whatever, right? They don't have anything to do with good versus bad. Both the dark and the light can be equally wounded, and they can be equally divine. Now, when we talk about wounded light, well, let's start with wounded dark, because I think that one is an easier, or it's the obvious one. Wounded darkness is things like when our anger is lashing out unfairly at the people around us and impacting them. It is things like war. It is things like the genocide that we're currently watching unfold right before our eyes. This is wounded darkness. And I think that when we talk about shadow work and we talk about inner work and all these things, very often we're talking about or assuming we're talking about wounded darkness. But wounded light is actually just as, if not more, in my opinion, problematic for us as individuals as well as the collective. So wounded light is things like people pleasing to the point of self-sacrifice, okay? A lack of boundaries, the inability to access your anger in the first place. But it also looks like being high vibe enough to be neutral about something like genocide or war or loss or anything else like that, by saying somebody isn't ascended enough or high vibe enough, and that is why they are feeling grief or they are feeling anger or they are feeling envy or they are feeling fill in the blank emotion. This, of course, is spiritual bypassing, okay? It can also be toxic positivity. And these are real problems, both as us for individuals in our day-to-day lives, when we, for example, have good girl conditioning that is so severe that we are unable to even kind of unravel the things that we want, or we are, putting the responsibility of everyone else's happiness above our own or everybody else's care above our own constantly. It also impacts our spiritual path, where we start to try and bypass emotions or extinguish emotions that we are meant to feel. We are meant to feel grief. We are meant to feel anger. We are meant to feel envy. We are human. We are supposed to feel the full range of human emotions. And there is nobody who's going to convince me that if I was only high vibe enough that I would never feel grief again or I would never feel anger again. And it also impacts us collectively very severely, because wounded light gives space for the wounded darkness to happen. So when the wounded light comes in and tells us, don't rock the boat, don't risk making people angry, it's not safe to have an opinion, or you need to be high vibe enough to be neutral in the face of all of these atrocities going on in our world, that creates space for that wounded darkness to exist, for that wounded darkness to continue to exist in the world. We are supposed to be human. Our spiritual paths are supposed to help us ground into our humanity, ground into both our individual experience, our individual health, our individual well-being, and the well-being of the collective, the humanity of the collective, our ability to be empathetic about what is happening to somebody else. We are supposed to feel these things as human. And when we sever ourselves from that in the name of spirituality, I really believe that we are missing the point entirely. Now, one of the places that I see this happen is when we have people leaving Christianity, whether you come from a very severe sect of Christianity, very strict, or whether you just live in a Western society, which means it's built on Christian values. We step into a more authentic spiritual path, a more alternative one. We start to try and find our ancestral roots within spirituality or deconstruct our Christianity so we can decide what we believe for ourselves. And when we don't do that fully, we bring that worldview, we bring that conditioning straight into our new spiritual path. So the 7 deadly sins are one of the places that we can look to for structure and understanding about this. Now, I have a whole collaboration on the channel where it was like 2 hours and 15 minutes where I talked to Kristen Ramazana. We went through each individual sin. We talked about the divine beings that embody them, all these things. I, of course, have my Reclaiming Eve program where the 7 deadly sins are a big chunk of that. It's a group shadow work program. I like the 7 deadly sins because they give us a framework to understand wounded light and wounded dark and how it affects us as individuals and through us individually, the collective. If we talk about something like anger, wounded darkness is when our anger is just lashing out at everybody, okay? Wounded light, when it comes to anger, is an inability to access it in the first place, whether that be because wounding and shadow and inner children and all these things are preventing us from accessing our anger in an attempt to keep us safe, whether that is good girl conditioning, saying you're not allowed to be angry. A lot of women specifically have trouble accessing anger in the first place. So wounded dark, we have the type of stereotypical anger that is hurting people around us unnecessarily. Wounded light with anger is where we can't access it at all, or we're bypassing it, or we're saying, don't be angry, that's low vibe, right? Integrated anger is when we can understand that anger is what points us towards what's important to us, to where our boundaries are being violated, to where injustice is happening towards us or somebody else. We should feel angry about genocide. We should feel angry when somebody purposefully steps over our boundaries. We should feel angry when somebody mistreats us. We shouldn't burn down innocent people with our anger in the process, but we should be able to use that anger to drive us to action for us and for other people. Anger is, of course, one of the 7 deadly sins, right? Envy. Envy is another one that women especially have a very hard time accessing because it is so demonized in society that we can't even identify, that's the word I'm looking for. We can't even identify when we feel envy. So what we feel is triggered. We feel triggered by another woman. We go, oh, who does she think she is? Or, oh, she rubs me the wrong way. And we can't identify that what we're feeling is envy, that she has something we want. If we can't identify that it's envy, we can't identify that it's something that we want. And there's nothing wrong with wanting things. So of course, wounded darkness, being too envious of people, is a problem. But when we can't identify our envy, we can't identify the authentic pieces that we want in our lives, like the things that we actually want in our life. We can identify that when we can't identify envy. Now, this is, of course, different than feeling, triggered or unhappy or disliking somebody for a legitimate reason. But that discernment of being able to understand when your nervous system is activated or when you dislike someone or something because it's truly toxic and truly out of alignment for you, versus the activation that happens in your system or the dislike that happens or whatever it feels like for you, when there's something you need to look at, is really important. Being able to understand when you are activated by something or triggered by something because what that person said is truly harmful, versus when what that person said either triggered something in you that needs to be healed and looked at, or is simply covering up something like envy, something like you seeing something you want for yourself. The 7 deadly sins is a framework for that. And it is how good girl conditioning has been sort of internalized by Western society. It is what keeps us from having healthy boundaries. It's what keeps us from being able to access our anger. It's what keeps us from feeling safe to use our voice, from living the lives that we want, from not self-sacrificing, being the constant need to be good enough. That's all this wounded light, and that's all the 7 deadly sins. And it controls us on an individual level, and it controls us on a societal level. And it is also the same type of wounding that keeps us from rocking the boat when something truly needs to happen. So when we are looking at injustice in our society or against somebody we know or someone ourselves, it's about not rocking the boat, not being too afraid to make people angry or say the wrong thing, because we need to be good. We need to be good girls in the face of something like genocide. Or just be high vibe enough. You're just not ascended enough. That is you coming straight out of Christianity, not you, like you, the person watching this, but like you, the collective, us. That is us coming straight out of Christianity and just taking the lens that we wore inside of Christianity and now looking at our new spiritual path through it. That's what that is. Our spiritual path should help us. It should help us sink deeper into our humanity for ourselves and for the collective. It should not sever us from ourselves. It should not sever us from the collective. I cannot help take care of the collective if I am not taking care of myself. And this is where the divine darkness can really come in. Teaching you to set boundaries, teaching you to access healthy anger and healthy grief and all these things. But I also can't be healthy when my collective is suffering. And when I am not doing what I need to do to help the collective. And that is where wounded light comes in, or divine light can come in and help us help the collective. I thought I was going to get this video done all in one take, but there's construction going on and it got very loud for a second. So if I haven't made my point clear, we are here to experience humanity, all of it. We are supposed to feel grief, we are supposed to feel anger, and we are supposed to let that anger move us to action. To care for ourselves and to care for the collective. We are supposed to do both. And I want no part of a spiritual path that requires me to sever myself from humanity, whether that be my own humanity, telling me that things like my sexuality or my authenticity or my voice are sinful in some way. And I also don't want any part of a collective or any part of a spiritual path that requires me to sever myself from the suffering of the collective in order to be high vibe enough. We can do both. That's what we're here to do, is to hold the duality that is the human experience. So there are no low vibe emotions, but allowing them to get stuck and not move through your body and into aligned action for you, that can certainly be, in quotes, low vibe. Wounded dark and wounded light is one way that we can look at this spectrum and start to really understand it in our human brains. And there are divine beings who can help us on both sides or in the middle of this spectrum. Shadow work can be really helpful. Sacred ceremony can be really helpful. There's all these different modalities that can help us to integrate our light and our darkness so that we can be as healthy as possible as individuals and then move that through us from a place of overflow into collective care. If there's anything in this video you'd like me to expand upon or any questions that you have, don't hesitate to throw them in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.